Hello and welcome to this very special edition of Montclair News Lab. I'm Louis Biontolillo, standing outside of the Ben Samuels Children's Center. It was here where Vice President Kamala Harris participated in a roundtable discussion on early childhood education. She was in New Jersey as part of President Biden's ambitious budget agenda and to promote COVID-19 vaccinations. Well, here's what's coming up on this very special episode. First, we hear from the select student journalists allowed in on the action behind the Vice President's visit.
This whole adventure started last week.
Then, we speak to political expert Jonathan Alter about how these visits influence change.
This is what vice presidents are supposed to do.
And later, we hear from students involved from Vice President Harris's own Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority.
I was excited and I wanted to touch her and say hi.
Your school, your news. All this and more on Montclair News Lab. There has to be something important for the Vice President of the United States to come to a college campus. My colleague Bernice Dagwell reports what happened behind the curtains when VP Harris stopped by.
Vice President Kamala Harris came to the Ben Samuels Children's Center at Montclair State to talk about the administration's Build Back Better agenda. Her point of focus? Early childhood care and education, two areas that she says were greatly affected during the pandemic.
As it relates to working parents, we should support as a society that says that every person should have a meaningful opportunity to work, that they should have a meaningful opportunity to parent their children and to participate, not only in their community, but in our economy, to pursue whatever may be their passions and their dreams.
Her visit was not only memorable because she is the sitting vice president, but she's the only woman to have ever held this office and the first person of color. So there are only 3 student journalists let into the event. I was one of them, along with the editor-in-chief at the Montclair, Sam Nungesser, and WMSC's Promotions and Digital Marketing Director, Yasmin Yilmaz. For me, this whole adventure started last week when I got a call in my dorm from my professor asking me if I wanted to be in the room with her covering the event. I think I said something along the lines of, obviously, of course I do. The next 2 days were followed with a lot of COVID tests and even more Secret Service. When we arrived on site, we walked to the entrance of the Children's Center, where police officers were directing parents on where to drop off their children for this special visit. We were then brought into the press room, where we awaited the Vice President for nearly 2 hours. So naturally, we took selfies. After Vice President Kamala Harris finally arrived, we were then brought into the room where the roundtable was being held. Don't worry, more selfies were taken. I know reporters are supposed to be objective, and I had to contain my excitement. All I wanted to do was wave at her, but I knew that wouldn't be professional. After an unforgettable 12 minutes, the press left the room to let the Vice President continue her talk with New Jersey leaders and mothers in private. Outside of the center, we talked to Montclair State University alum Shante Palmer, Vice Chancellor of the External Government Relations for Rutgers University, who sat with the Vice President to advocate for non-traditional students with busy schedules.
Talking about child care and aftercare and before care and the care of our children is of utmost importance. Being back at the Montclair State campus, I understand that a lot of non-traditional students also have issues with child care and being able to provide and take care of their families.
Another voice at the table, District 11 Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, spoke to us about the ongoing debate in Washington regarding the backlash on the reconciliation bill and the bipartisan infrastructure bill.
So these 2 bills are critical to the families here in New Jersey, and we've got to get back to Washington. We've got to get them passed, and we've got to get it done quickly.
As a woman of color, it meant so much to me to get to experience this with an all-female production team and be part of a history-making event on campus. My lifelong dream is to be a White House correspondent, and I feel like this experience brought me one step closer.
I'm sitting down with Bernice Dagwell, Sam Nungesser, and Yasmin Yilmaz. What was the most surprising thing that you as a student journalist witnessed on Friday?
Being able to stand next to all of the other national journalists while we were there covering the event was something that I've never had to experience before. It just solidified why I'm doing this, and it gave me a little glimpse into my future. It was amazing.
Right. And do you think covering the vice president is something that you can see yourself doing in your future world?
My whole college career, I've been really headstrong on being I'm going to be an entertainment journalist and that's what I want to do. And I think after this, it was it kind of opened my eyes, like, oh wow, like there is more, and this is like really exciting.
So I'm actually a film major here at Montclair State, and the reason why I decided to pursue film was to be able to work in documentaries. I could definitely see myself even pursuing the journalism, aspect of that world. And so, yeah, to keep my answer short, definitely, it would be cool to be able to keep track of that.
And I figure that you guys are probably very excited, having a lot of emotions going through your head at one time once actually seeing her come into the room. So, what would be one thing that you would say to her if you had the chance to speak to her?
Or what would be the next step for a return to normalcy aside from vaccinations, if there is anything else besides that, what would we as a country have to do for that return to normalcy, especially in like an educational institution like ours?
My question would definitely be something along the lines of climate change, especially now that we're in a pandemic. Disposable masks, it's not something that we can simply ignore anymore. And our world is burning. And especially now that you add the factor of the pandemic.
And because this event was so memorable for you all, 50 years from now, what would you tell your grandchildren about this day?
Pass on all my pictures I took in the room. Um, I definitely think that it is cool. And like Bernice said, at 21 years old or 20 years old, getting to do this when we were the only three students there. There were so many people that have been doing this their whole lives that like weren't there.
It's just still a moment in history that's going to impact the government and our future forever. The fact that she's the first female vice president, it just shows women and girls all that there is that possibility for them, and like that in itself is inspiring and a key message that I would want to tell my grandchildren, like it's possible, anything's possible.
It was such like an out of body experience for me. I don't even have words to describe how insane that day. I think insane is the word I would use, because it was insanely cool, it was insanely exciting, it was insanely nerve-wracking. So I feel like insane kind of encompasses all the emotions that the three of us were feeling when we were in the room when she walked in.
Why do presidents and vice presidents hit the road to sell their agendas? And does it work? I sat down with seasoned journalist and presidential politics expert Jonathan Alter, who happened to be across the pond.
I was curious if those visits to communities often make a difference in either polling, public support, or any other metric.
It's a great question because it's often very difficult to draw a direct connection between a politician going out and campaigning on a set of issues and any change in support for those issues. Sometimes it makes sense to go places where that the president is popular in order to create a sense of good feeling around him. He's suffering a little bit in the polls right now. So to go someplace where he's going to be warmly greeted and she is going to be warmly greeted, that can sometimes just help in terms of establishing some momentum.
If there's really no direct correlation between these visits and poll numbers changing, why spend so much money? Why spend so much time and effort to come into these communities to speak about these issues?
Well, first of all, the polling doesn't matter right now because there's not an election for more than a year.
Right.
There is an election, however, in just a few weeks in New Jersey. And so one of the reasons that she's here is to make sure that the voters of New Jersey know that Governor Phil Murphy has the full support of the Biden administration. And this is what vice presidents are supposed to do. They don't have a lot of constitutional authority beyond breaking a tie in the Senate and presiding over the Senate as the president of the Senate. The larger responsibility beyond going to funerals and other ceremonial duties, doing some diplomatic work, is to try to sell the program of the president. And this one's for all the marbles. I mean, it's not like, he's introducing 15 different bills the way earlier presidents did. This is a gargantuan piece of legislation. And the country's, very closely divided, not on the bill, but in our institutions of government. Only a few votes separate the Republicans and Democrats in the House. and no votes separate them in the Senate. She will be called upon when it comes to a vote to break the tie, which vice presidents don't have to do very often.
Do you think that there is a chance that Kamala Harris runs for president in the next term?
Some Democrats who think she might not be the strongest candidate. There are other Democrats who really like her. All of this is yet to be determined and will play out in 2023 and 24.
When the vice president comes to your campus, she comes with an entourage. News Lab reporter Giovanna Boggins shares a behind-the-scenes peek of the visit.
The Ben Samuels Children's Center normally doesn't have a black drape shielding the door and police and Secret Service filling the parking lot. Students walk back and forth on the sidewalk in front to watch the day unfold. But all the commotion stopped 15 minutes before the vice president's arrival when police blocked off Clove Road. As the motorcade arrived, the vice president sat in one of the black Chevy Suburbans as other law enforcement vehicles trailed behind her. To a civilian, this might seem like heavy security, but it's not as heavy as it is for the president.
The presidential motorcade is, I wouldn't say twice as long, but it's longer. Yeah. Once you cover a presidential motorcade, plus you lose all your cell service. They cut out all the cell service just for security. It's much longer. This was manageable.
Angelo Martin was there with ABC New York reporter Anthony Johnson, who says these kinds of visits are just another day in the life of a busy reporter.
The vice president was coming to town. Actually, I didn't know till this morning, so I basically just started going online and looking up what she'd be talking about.
On the other end of Clove Road, we met these supporters of Vice President Kamala Harris.
We are in support of the Biden-Harris agenda, and we wanted to be here to help show the world that they have the support of New Jerseyans.
Well, not every New Jerseyan. There were other groups who felt that the Biden-Harris administration wasn't doing enough to help immigrants.
We have been fighting for the path to citizenship for many years now, and during this opportunity we have been promised many times, especially at the very beginning of this administration, during the first 100 years, that a path to citizenship was going to be a priority.
But our Clove Road Biden supporters blame Republicans.
The DREAM Act needs to be permanently passed, and that we need a path to citizenship for immigrants.
The reporters, supporters, and protesters soon left, and Clove Road returned to normal. For Montclair News Lab, I'm Giovanna Boggins.
There was a lot of reaction on campus to VP Harris's visit, but we focused on members of the same historically black sorority that she was a part of during her time at college. Here's what members of Montclair State's chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha had to say.
We spoke to two Montclair State students, Delaney Haggins and Alexis Wakefield, who have an interesting connection to the vice president. They call her their soror, or sorority sister. The vice president belonged to Alpha Kappa Alpha when she was in college at Howard University.
We are both a part of the Rho Phi chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and we are so happy to be here. Our soror VP Kamala Harris was on our campus today.
The students wear sweatshirts with 1908 on them. That's the year AKA was founded at Howard University. It was the first black sorority in the country.
Now, how did it feel watching the motorcade drive by, knowing she was inside? Were you excited? Were you scared? Were you nervous?
I was excited and I wanted to touch her and say hi. I wanted a little way her to see my letters on in order to not talk to me, but acknowledge it. Yeah.
Now, if you had an opportunity to talk to VP Harris, or your soror, as you said, what would you tell her?
I would just say first and foremost, I would say just I'm proud of you. Soror, I'm proud of you. I'm thankful for, you just representing our country, you being, the black queen that you are, and just continue keeping up the great work.
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Montclair News Lab, on TikTok at Montclair.newslab, and check out our website, montclairnewslab.tv, for more. Thank you for joining us for this very special episode. It's not every day that student journalists get to get such close coverage of this historic vice president, and it was really a great experience for everyone involved. Well, that's it for this week's special edition of Montclair News Lab. I'm Louis Biantilillo, and we'll see you next week.